Kevin, my friend, welcome to the Campfire.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike. Glad to be here.
I'm excited. So I want to hit you with a question right off the top of my head. What is motivation in your eyes?
Well, motivation, I would say, is kind of the ability to stay focused and look forward to what you're doing rather than having to do something. I'd say that to me is motivation. It's being able to kind of maintain that perspective on a regular basis and do it in such a way that you may feel exhausted at the end of the day, but at the same time, you want to come back and do more of it.
So that's throwing a 55-pound backpack on your back, a crossbow in your hand, and running out on opening day, spending the day out, tracking down a deer you don't see, getting home, being exhausted, but yet having a smile on your face.
Exactly, and you probably want to go and do it again, right? It's that challenge of the hunt. It's challenge of applying your skill. Um, there's a great book that was written by a gentleman by the name of Daniel Pink called Drive, and he talks about how you stay motivated and engaged of having three elements in place: autonomy, so being able to control your environment. Mastery, developing that skill, and purpose, so that you really have not just a superficial purpose, a deeper purpose of why you're doing it. And if you can have those three elements in place, you can stay motivated and engaged. So it's really that simple. The key is how do you determine those elements and keep them in play on a regular basis? And that's a lot of the work and a lot of research I've done of how you do that.
See, that's where I've driven really deep into philosophy to develop a practice for that. And I built the sense of worth and motivation day in and day out by the swing of a hatchet, literally.
Well, I would say for the people in the corporate world, they're probably swinging different kinds of hatchets, more of a metaphorical hatchet than anything else. And, the great thing about just human beings in general is we're all different. We all like different things. If you can kind of find your tribe, and find the people that resonate with you, and learn with them, the thing that I always got from my father. I was born and raised in, the Philadelphia area in, the normal suburban kind of town with the cookie cutter houses and the two kids and the station wagon and the dog. And, one of my things that my dad always told me is, find the people that you can kind of relate to, that you enjoy being with, and learn from them. And his point was that anything else anybody else can do, so could you. And stretch yourself on a regular basis. Always try to do something just a little bit harder than you think that you can accomplish. And if you fail at it, then at least because if you always do things that you're going to be successful at, you can't grow at a rate that is going to be exponential.
There's a word in there that you said that everybody will gravitate to that something was wrong. That's failure. And a lot of what I do is working to change that narrative in our lives from the victim to the hero, right?
Mhm.
And the reason failure becomes so important to us is because we all get caught up in that story of self-suffering. We're not good enough. So I want to talk a little bit about failure in a different context. Because in my eyes, failure is more so the stone of learning
Mhm.
than it is the point of arrival.
Mhm. Yeah, and one of the things that we do when I teach a lot of leadership classes, for my firm, we talk about using the F words a lot in the classes, fail forward fast, right? That you want to make sure that your failure is not fatal, of course. You want to just make sure that it's that there is a recoverable approach. And if you can if you can just continue, as my dad had said, always doing something just a little bit harder than what you think you can do, at least you know your boundaries. And if you failed at something, then you can just ask yourself, hey, can I learn? Can I expand my experience to be able to get to the next level? And some of the times, yeah, you might be able to do that. You may not be a great basketball player. You're probably never going to be able at the level of Michael Jordan or someone like that. But if anything else anyone else can do, so can you. Just may not be at the same level. Continuing to stretch yourself, I think, is really important to building yourself. And the other thing is, I think the more you build yourself, the more rising tide lifts all boats, the more you can lift up others as well.
It gets back to that idea of weightlifting essentially, because we're toning muscles. Every time that we have a moment of failure, we have to pick ourselves back up. And a lot of my transition within myself is based around the self-talk, the vocabulary that I use in my head. So, I'd have a moment where I'd fail at something and I'd get down on myself. And through a lot of work and paying attention to those words and that vocabulary, it shifted from this is just a complete failure, I blah 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 this, blah 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 that, to I can really dissect what I just encountered and came up short on. And I can utilize those things. And I do that a lot when I take somebody out into the field on a hike. We get through things and they struggle with maybe a staircase early
Mm-hmm.
on in the hike. And then we get to a point where maybe the next staircase is 150 steps. They don't want to go up it because they're like, man, I was huffing and puffing on the last 30 steps. And one thing that I taught myself about failure is the idea that you still can go forward, because to go
Mm-hmm.
back is just as hard. And that's what I utilize that those metaphors with the staircases with. It's all about the environment. You can make the environment whatever it is you want. If you want to sit in that negative footprint of failure, the world will let you do that. But if you want to go forward, you know, the ground underneath you is there to support you. You can therefore shift it to whatever tools you need to improve along that journey.
Yeah, and I think it follows the approach we take as well, is to kind of fail forward fast, right? That, there's a lot of people that really spend all the time kind of thinking through things and not doing it, right? Although many people feel comfortable with that, I've always found, and when I was working at Intel for 18 years, we used to have something called rapid prototyping. And rapid prototyping was encouraged that when you thought you had an idea, just go out and do it, right? Don't get it to a point where it's, reasonable, and then try it. And too often, a lot of design engineers that I worked with wanted to have it perfect, and perfect is the enemy of success and progress. So get it 50% there, 80% there, whatever the number is, because what you learn from applying it will save you, weeks or months or even years. So you don't know what you don't know, and you want to jump in. Once again, you want to have your failure, because that's where you learn, not to be fatal. You just want it to be an opportunity to kind of reflect on how you can do it better next time, like your example with the stair steps.
Absolutely. And to me, I found it's a lot of really tapping into perseverance,
Mm.
in every aspect of our lives. If we're allowing ourselves that opportunity to do the work when it seems like it's either a failure or a struggle, and we're trying to regroup ourselves, that's where we get to learn about those skill sets that are within us that are going to help us pull that failure and move it across the water to become some kind of success.
Yeah, and I think the challenges from the different people I've worked with and coached is, if they come with this perspective of a fixed mindset of this is the way it has to be, and if you do this, you get that, and it's always going to be successful, and they really don't have, what Carol Dweck would talk about, as a growth mindset, having the ability to grow. It's difficult to get them unstuck. So I think, and there's some really good research that says, we're born with a certain amount of kind of nature, that kind of how we're wired and chemically wired. And then there's some nurture that happens from the family and friends and acquaintances that you work with. And it's about 50-50. So there's a lot of people that have been born with, that growth mindset. And there's a lot of people who have been born with a fixed mindset. And it's that other 50% that how you approach that really makes the difference. So the people born with the growth mindset, which I would say I was born with a growth mindset, building on top of that makes it even better. There's a lot of people that struggle that don't have that advantage. And I think one of the things that you have to have from a compassion and empathy perspective as a manager, as a leader, as a coach, as a friend and colleague, that you have to be able to recognize some people may not have had the genetic wiring that many of us have. And then on top of that, if you're born with a fixed mindset of this is the only way to do it, and your environment, from how you've grown up as a kid, reinforces that, getting out of that mindset is very difficult. It's not impossible. It's much, much more of a challenge.
It sounds to me like, a lot of it is that perspective. When you go from a black and white perspective where everything is just this and that, and you transition to a more colorful palette where you realize that, hey, I can take, say, the color blue and the color green, and I can mix them together and make something new. That's where
Mhm.
you step into that real growth.
Yeah, and I think the challenge for at least the people that struggle with that the most is that you have to have that empathy for them, that they are probably having been given those gifts that many of us have gotten early on in our lives, genetically as well as the kind of the nurture perspective. Um, and the good news is, I did all of my background is, I'm the kind of the nerd engineer type. I did my undergrad work in engineering and business and an MBA, and ultimately did all my doctoral work in organizational leadership focused around human motivation and engagement. So that's my kind of my expertise. And one of the things that I learned through the research is that if you can get yourself into this concept of flow, and in flow is kind of found out, the concept of flow was determined by a guy by the name of Dr. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. He was the department chair of the University of Chicago Department of Psychology, and I was fortunate enough to have him help on my committee to help me do my research. And what Mihai had found was that all of us have the ability to kind of get in flow. And in the 90s, it was retermed being in the zone, like getting in the zone. Like, oh, people know that. Some people don't understand the concept of flow. And it's really just being in the zone. And there's 8 elements that create this zone factor. And one of them in particular is where this sense of time is very distorted in a very positive way, where you look up at the clock or you look at your watch and it's like 3 hours later than you think it can be, and you have no idea where that had happened. What happened with those 3 hours, and that's when you're in flow, and flow happens when your challenge level and your skill level meet. So if you're to draw a curve, that right at that point where they're meeting, where it's just the right level of challenge and just the right level of skill, you kind of get in that zone. And the more you can get in the zone, it doesn't necessarily guarantee productivity. What it does guarantee is it guarantees creativity. That's where you get all of your incredible ideas. And if you go too high in challenge and too low in skill, you get this anxiety range. And if your skill is way too high and your challenge is way too low, or you've done it a million times, you get in the boredom category. And it's that center bar that if you can get that right balance of challenge and skill all the time, life is great. You stay motivated and engaged. And what we found through my research has been that if I can just stay just a little bit above that flow zone where my challenge is just a little above where I think I can achieve it, then what happens is you develop the skill and you move back into the zone. And it's that continual challenging yourself at a level that you feel is possible, not impossible. Because once you move into the impossible range, what happens is you go from kind of overloaded to overwhelmed. And overwhelmed is when you're not thinking clearly and you're spending more time on the worry than you are on the experience.
See, that's where I feel like this conversation really makes its gravy, and I was really excited about it because for me, the this project began when I was at the lowest of lows, right? And I was really struggling to find motivation to go through the day and this and that and deal with everything. And I found that based off of, the simple little level of mastery and
Mm-hmm.
the explanation that you gave for that, I feel it transcends not only the idea of leadership, but it comes back into that little puddle of darkness where a lot of us find ourselves caught at different points in our lives where we're stuck, we're
Mm-hmm.
depressed, and we're trying desperately to find that motivation. So you touched on perfectly, that first seed is just finding that one simple thing that you're good at and just achieving that every single day. And then starting to put a little bit of challenge on top of that as you start to build this momentum. And that ultimately starts building that ladder to dig you out of so you can climb out of that little hole you're in.
Yeah. Yeah, and Mike, you can really supercharge that if the thing that you're doing contributes to others, right? So there's one thing that you may like, for example, if you're a musician, right? You could be playing guitar or bass or drums or piano, whatever it is, right? You can get continually better at that. And so I'm a musician, right? I know quite some, I'm a drummer and I sit down at the set sometimes and I'm playing, particularly if I'm playing with a band that, is 3 hours, seems like 30 minutes, and just don't know where the time goes, particularly when you're getting very creative. I'm a jazz player, so I like jazz and fusion kind of music, which is always changing and very less structured. So it's a lot of good challenge, and it's kind of getting into that zone. And the thing I found is that you get one level of degree of advancement in flow when it's focused internally for it's your mastery, and then you reach a whole nother level when you're really doing it for others, where you're making music for others, where you can see those smiles. You have some kind of trade, that something that you've developed, an art, whether you're any kind of artist, that you're developing it and you're bringing others along with you, that really supercharges the motivation. Because once you know you're at a singular level where the focus is internal, once you know that you've gone to the external focus where it's much more about us and we rather than me, one thing is it helps maintain that focus. And the second thing is it really contributes at a significantly higher level. So I would encourage anybody that's listening is to think about what gets you in that zone, and then what are the things that you can do in that zone that not only contribute to your mastery, but also contribute to helping others and building others up.
And it's another great domino on the board because when you think about being in that position, you're in survival mode, right? You're only looking for the mastery to say, perhaps somewhere to sleep, perhaps a shelter and a fire. And you forget about the rest of the environment around you. So if you were to actually dart off down that trail and start looking and seeing nature within its everyday processes, you
Mhm.
remember, hey, I can do these things too. There's hope
Mhm.
in there. And that hope, gets you to kind of start bringing those mastery parts out of you and taking on those challenges. And I know for me personally, as I started doing that, that gave birth to the project. through
Hmm.
writing and just sharing, and then ultimately holding my feet to the fire. Because now I had this thing I was doing that people were actually following along with, and I had to hold myself to dealing with my depression, my anxiety, and all the other things.
Hmm.
And that was, not only was that masterful and challenging, but it was also kind of fulfilling. It was actually kind of exciting to fall into a purpose with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of what I just mentioned. It's right. It's where it's you start with the internal focus and then you allow it to go external. And now where you're making a difference for other people. It's, I used to when I first moved to I was born and raised in Philadelphia area, but we moved to Phoenix about 30 years ago. And we were in a new development. Fortunately, there was a mountain right across the street from us, and we used to hike every morning. And there was about 4 or 5 of us. And once we kind of started holding each other accountable, that's 6 o'clock when you're looking at the clock and you don't have to go to work till 8, and you're thinking, man, I could get another hours of sleep or I can get up. Just knowing that the other people that are going to be waiting outside your house to go do the hike together really is different, right? And you have a purpose, so you're helping them, and you're helping yourself, just like kind of what you've experienced and articulated.
Yeah, actually, you mentioned that in a roundabout way of, you know, not only holding yourself accountable, but tapping into the people around you in order to get more accountability to hold your feet to the fire. And I think that it's actually, as annoying as it can be at times, it's a very beneficial thing. And actually, your backdrop there, the mountains there, is that the picture that you took?
Hmm.
Which mountain range is that, out of curiosity?
I don't know. It's a stock photo, but I loved the image so much that I've put it there. Uh, and actually, you know what I can do? I'm going to just show you and adjust the background in real time here. And I'm going to show you my backyard, right, for those that can see it. So that's the mountain range that are the one we used to hike is on the other side, but this is my backyard. And opportunity to kind of sit out there, watch all the critters and the coyotes and the javelinas and all the rabbits and doves. We got a ton of quail that kind of live back there. Just kind of connecting to nature like you do. It looks like you probably do on a more regular basis than I do, Mike. Is I think is really really good. One of the challenges that all humans have is that we are always looking for causal effects. Like if I put an hour into this, I get an hour return. And the real challenge to develop yourself and develop others is very much like you started out talking about going to the gym, that you don't see that advantage, the first day or second day or third day. It might take a couple weeks. And then when you need it, where you need to lift that heavy box or, protect yourself in another way, all of a sudden, all of that investment work comes to fruition and you have that advantage. And it's having that ability to have faith, um, to be able to recognize that you're making that conscious effort in order to get better. And at some point in time, if you have the faith and you continue building that routine and process, which I know is one of the other podcasts that you had done. There was a great podcast on how do you build that routine and those habits. That once you develop that your ability to really make it a monumental leaps forward from other people is there. So you just have to have the faith, build those habits, go to the gym on a regular basis, go on that hike every morning at 6 o'clock. Really does make a difference. And I think it's the same for just about anything, whether you're working for yourself or you're working in a big organization, having that diligence, as you mentioned earlier, the persistence and the focus, right? So that you know where you're going. If you don't have a goal of where you're going, you're going to end up somewhere may not be where you want to be.
See, I think that right there can actually be built on the new backdrop that you got actually, because you can see kind of the steps along the mountain as it builds. And a lot of the time along that process, we get frustrated because we are not seeing the actual results happen. And that mountain, as you see the steps on it, it gives you a visual reminder. This is one of the things that I love pointing out along a hike is you can see the next step off in the distance. So
Mhm.
you know it's there. And when you come back into the concrete world and all that stress is just pummeling you and you lose sight of that, you can remind yourself, you can pull that picture up on your phone and see the way that mountain works its way up. And you can say, hey, in time, I'm going to get to that next plateau, that next level. It just takes time to get there. So it's a great reminder.
Yeah, one thing I want to give the listeners here is for those that can see my background, there's a little bit of a header at the top that says positive intelligence or PQ. If anyone hasn't done that, that's something positive intelligence really is kind of an expansion of emotional intelligence. If you haven't delved into that, done any reading on it, there's a wonderful book and a program by Shirzad Shamin on positive intelligence. You can get it on Amazon, get the book on Amazon, or they can go to my site. If you go to pqtrainingandcoaching.com, you'll get a quick start guide and a link to be able to go in and answer some questions, take an assessment. And what it'll do is it'll tell you um, what your 10 saboteurs are in your brain that is holding you back. And it'll also give you a point to be able to assess what Shirzad talks about as your sage brain. So you have a saboteur brain and a sage brain. Once you kind of recognize those saboteurs in your brain, whether it's the hyperachiever or whether it's the stickler or whether it's the victim, whatever it is, this will analyze that for you, and then it'll give you some great recommendations of what to do so that you can stay positive. And the other thing, kind of how to connect that with the flow concept, Mike, is that once I understand the things that are keeping me back, and I can keep them in control. And it's through mindfulness activities or meditation. It's really about being present and reflective. And the more you can do that, as you had mentioned, you may not see it immediately. Over time, it shows up. And then once it does show up, then you're convinced and it becomes something you want to run towards as opposed to try to avoid.
And I think that actually opens up probably one of the biggest hurdles that a lot of us have along these kind of journeys is what you just described opens the door for self responsibility.
Mhm. Yeah, you mean you have to take the ownership, in our the leadership program. So I left the corporate world 17 years ago. I had a personal goal that I wanted to retire at 50. And I took two of my colleagues. I spent 18 wonderful years at Intel. I used to manage Intel's management leadership development for the world. We used to do 2,500 managers and leaders in 10 different countries. When I took my early retirement in 2007, we had just finished training our 40,000th manager. So I got pretty good at that. Um, and the thing that I found is uh, that you have to when you start your firm, and go or start or leave the corporate world or the organizational world where you're going to do your own thing. um, you want to bring people along, and I took two of my colleagues with me so we could do that together, so it wasn't just a lonely journey. um, and one of the foundational pieces that we developed and we found was valuable was taking a leadership perspective on everything. So, so when we look at things, where something has gone drastically wrong, or you have a difficult client, or you've not achieved what you want, the foundational piece, which is based around the servant leadership model, is we tell everyone you always want to start with the perspective of I'm the problem or I'm contributing to the problem. And if you can take that reflective piece, that ownership piece that you're mentioning, where you really say, you start with, what could I have done differently? Has the environment changed? have I changed? Has the person changed? Are the resources limited? And starting from a reflective perspective rather than, you screwed up and we need to fix you. Life gets a whole lot better. And I really, really wish, our goal was to help train leaders to really not only think about that perspective of starting with I'm the problem. And there's a lot of people, a lot of leaders, in particular today, that don't have that ability or don't believe they have that ability. And if you really can get them to stay focused, if you can really have them take the ownership, you can move much, much more into collaboration than and typically what happens in most organization, whether it's me versus you.
Almost definitely. And I think that resonates a lot with a lot of people. So after hearing that statement and really sitting there thinking about it for a minute, if someone was to come to you with the idea that I'm kind of perplexed with where I'm at, I want to be a more empathetic and effective leader, not only in my professional life, but my family life as well. What
Mhm.
advice would you give them to get started?
Well, I think the first piece of advice I would give them, because I end up doing a lot of coaching, particularly for executives that have gotten to a plateau. And you don't really have to be an executive. You've kind of gotten to that plateau where things are pretty much the same, or maybe it's a little bit of a decline. And what I tell them, there's a great model that comes out of Harvard. Um, the leadership model that says there's three elements in order to build this reinforcing cycle. First thing is you need to know thyself, right? You need to be able to say, hey, I am open to do a deeper dive into myself about my strengths, my weaknesses, my opportunities, threats. If you do a SWOT analysis essentially of yourself, to really do some inter-reflection is the first step. The second step is to understand others, really spend the time to understand that everybody doesn't come from the same place that you do, and not only understand it, also respect it. And then the third step, which you need in order to be a change agent, is you have to initiate and sustain change. So you have to make a change. If you know yourself and you know others and you don't do anything with it, there's not a lot of value there. And if you do those three steps, it's what's known as a reinforcing cycle. It becomes a virtuous cycle. And if you don't do it, it reverses itself and it becomes a vicious cycle. So if you can do that, my recommendation is spend a little bit of time doing a deeper dive of yourself, right? That's where the hard work happens. And I'd say most people have a hard time doing it on their own. So I'd say hire a coach, get a mentor, work with a colleague, someone that has some expertise that can help guide you. They may not have the answers. The best coaches really have the right questions that they can help you answer the kind of questions. And if you can do that, that's really the place to start. And the first thing is you have to be willing to do that. And if you're not willing to do that, and you just want to just do the initiate and sustain change piece, it's going to be a struggle the whole time.
I think the only thing that I can really come to mind to add to that is to be authentic, whether
Yes.
somebody's watching you or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the authenticity, the best leaders, I mean, we did some research, kind of probably about 10 or 12 years ago. We wanted to find out what the best leaders did, right? And we did a survey of over 1,200 leaders in 47 different countries. And the most amazing thing was that regardless of the culture, each leader that was rated highly all had the same high rating in one area, and it was communication. And if you, for a recommendation, if you have to get better at one thing, that's the only thing you can do, is if you can improve your communication, which means being authentic, right? If you're not authentic, people sense that, and you have to be authentic. If you can improve your authentic communication, that will raise you up more than anything else you could do kind of as developing your competence or expertise in certain areas. Just focus on your communication of how do you connect with people? How authentic are you? How empathetic are you? I'm not saying be easy on them. I'm just saying be able to connect in a way where they take the conversation as an opportunity and not as a threat.
I think that's some very fundamental, thought-provoking ideas that, honestly, if it was applied a lot more, would probably revolutionize today's world.
Yeah, and I think the one thing, that Shirzad Shamin has done with the positive intelligence program, and I really encourage everyone to take the assessment that the assessment's free, so there's no cost to it. Is to take the assessment and kind of learn about yourself. That his vision is to really create an environment where we're self-aware through the positive and emotional intelligence, so that we can have the conversations, worldwide. And the nice thing is, I got involved very early with his program about 4 years ago, and what went from dozens of people now is in the tens of thousands of people that have gone through it. And the goal has been really to change the way we interact just as human beings, both within our own cultures as well as external cultures. And if you look at the world, man, the world needs us so much now, because all the different cultures are more at odds than they should be.
Most definitely. So if someone wanted to come to you for help and all that good stuff, let them know how to get in touch with you, what you got going on, coming up, all that.
Sure. Well, first of all, I really encourage people to connect with me. And my promise to 100% of the people that do is there be absolutely no sales pitch. You're not going to get a sales pitch from me. My goal in life, I retired from Intel. I'm in a position that I really want to give back. So if you'd like to connect with me, there's lots of ways to do that. You can send an email to Kevin at Magna Leadership, Magna leadership.com. That'll go right to my business email address. You can go to the site if you want to see my leadership stuff at Magna Leadership. You can go to pqtrainingandcoaching.com. They'll tell you all the details of what we do to help train people on positive intelligence. And if you'd like some coaching, whether it's executive, personal development coaching, you can look at my site, which is coachsultants.com. coachsultants.com. You can read about all the different programs that we have. And if any of those are of interest to you, fantastic. And if you'd just like to have a chat with me to say, hey, I heard you on Mike's podcast, and I have some questions. I'm, thinking about, changing industries or changing jobs, or I can't get involved. I can't just seem to get into that flow. So you'll get an email from me. Just send me an email. I'll send you my calendar, and any open time on my calendar is yours. And once again, no sales pitch. If I can help you, great. If I can't help you, I'm most likely going to be able to point you in a direction where I can get you somebody that can help
I appreciate it. This has been a beautiful and amazing conversation. So thank you for taking the time today.
you. All right, and Mike, and thank you for sharing me with your listeners. I do appreciate it as well.
That's my privilege. I don't believe in the words goodbye. So until we meet again, whether it's this life or the next, I hope you have a safe and prosperous journey.
Okay, thanks, and the same to you.